we'll have Jacob Phipps, Caitlin Honeycutt, and Shelby Barley from the FFA to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Present arms.
Please join us in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Order, on.
We'd like to recognize a few special guests with us this morning. We have Mr. Larry Wooden, North Carolina Farm Bureau. Mr. Peter Daniels, North Carolina Farm Bureau. Tom Ellis, State Gauge. Pryor Gibson, North Carolina Forestry Association. And Chris Brown with the North Carolina Forestry Association. As well as all of our esteemed friends, colleagues, retirees, and other guests, we welcome you this morning. 100 years ago, North Carolina had a very different forest landscape. Acreage that had been cleared and farmed was abandoned and left fallow. The native longleaf pine savannas of the coastal plain were almost gone. In 1913, Chestnut Blight. All right, already having problems, Tom. Chestnut blight entered the state. The chestnut trees were decimated in about 10 years. Fires were measured in hundreds of thousands or even millions of acres. And the only forces to stop them were the residents and landowners, bearing shovels, rakes, and hoes. But things were about to change in North Carolina and the nation as it related to forestry. North Carolina is known widespread as the first in flight. North Carolina should also be known as the first in forestry. With the first professional forest management program in the nation conducted on the Biltmore Estate near Asheville, beginning in the early 1890s. In 1898, the Biltmore School of Forestry was founded as the first professional forestry school in the nation. The North Carolina Forestry Association was founded in 1911. The NCFA understood the importance of forestry in North Carolina and urged the General Assembly to create a state agency in charge of forestry. In 1915, the General Assembly created North Carolina's Forest Service under John Sincox Holmes, and he was named the first state forester. In 1921, Avery, Buncombe, Jackson, and New Hanover counties were the first county wildfire control cooperators. Today, all 100 counties in North Carolina participate in the cooperative program. In 1926, the state's first fire tower was constructed in Harnett County. There are many other events that can be recalled, such as the 600,000 acre fire in 1955, or Black Thursday that saw 127 fires burn over 125,000 acres in one day in 1963. However, to discuss all that has happened over the last 100 years would take much longer than the time we have allowed. So a century later, Mr. Holmes an agency of one in 1915, is now an organization of over 600 dedicated employees with a presence in every county of the state, fighting wildfires, providing woodland management advice to landowners, and addressing forest insect and disease issues. They educate our youth about the importance of the state's forest and our role in private landowner forestry, and bringing the forest experience to urban landscapes as well. I am very proud of the men and women who serve with the North Carolina Forest Service today and the thousands more who have served in the past. The sacrifices our employees and their families make to ensure that our state's forests stay healthy and sustainable is nothing less than amazing. There has been one thing that has not changed in 100 years since the General Assembly first created the North Carolina Forest Service, and that is the word service written on the patch that you bear on your sleeve. It has been there for 100 years, and we expect that it will always be there. The service underlies what we do as an agency, what we strive for, and what we intend to keep doing and promoting. I'm very proud of the service we provide to all of North Carolina, and thank you for being here with us today as we celebrate 100 years in the making. At this time, I would like to introduce Commissioner Steve Troxler of the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services.
First, I want to thank all of you for being here today. This is a momentous occasion when you can celebrate 100 years of anything, but especially when we're celebrating the 100th year anniversary of the Forest Service in North Carolina. And it means a lot. As I travel this state, I know from the mountains to the coast what a beautiful state this is, and I also can understand how important the forestry industry is to North Carolina. On a recent trip to China, I think all of us came back with a greater appreciation of what trees and forests mean. When you go over there and you go hours and hours and hours on trains, you never see a tree and you're breathing air that is awful. So you come back with a different appreciation, and it's something that we're celebrating today because of the Forest Service. We have all of this forest land in North Carolina that we can celebrate. Beyond the aesthetic part of the trees in North Carolina and the environmental quality that they bring to us, I don't think a lot of people understand the economic benefits of the forest in North Carolina. Agriculture and agribusiness is a $76 billion industry in the state, and the forest industry contributes about $24 billion of that, and also employs about 180,000 people in North Carolina. So there is a divide in North Carolina between the large cities that we have in rural North Carolina, and the forest industry and the agricultural industry are the economic engines that actually drive us. And the thing that's changed over the years that the Forest Service has been in existence, I think some of them you can see behind you here. Airplanes, helicopters, bulldozers, trucks. GIS has replaced a lot of paper maps, but there's one thing that has not changed, and that's the dedication of the Forest Service to the people of North Carolina, and it goes way beyond firefighting. Anytime we have a disaster in North Carolina, the Forest Service is one of the first responders to anything that we do, and even most recently, I got a letter of appreciation from the North Carolina Zoo that the Forest Service had come in and cleaned up the zoo after straight line winds had taken down a huge number of trees there, and they went in and did their business and did their job, and they were out, and maybe not everybody knew it, but we know it, and we appreciate it. The Forest Service has not always been in the Department of Agriculture. In fact, the legislature transferred the Forest Service to us in 2011. And if you think back, this was a time of tremendous wildfires in North Carolina and eastern North Carolina. So one of the first things that I got to see, it looked like half of eastern North Carolina was burning, and the Forest Service was responding to it. What I saw was professional people that had responded to these fires, were containing the fires in a very efficient manner, so I felt very at home with the Forest Service being in the Department of Agriculture. And I can tell you that since our transfer, the sum of the two, the things that we can do is much greater than the sum of the two agencies that came together. Emergency response in any kind of situation is much better now. In fact, we may have an outbreak of avian influenza in the poultry industry coming up, and if we do, the Forest Service will play a big role in how we respond to this economic and agricultural disaster in the state. So the legislature had a really good idea when they put the two of us together. And if you think about the synergy that we already had, we are growing crops. Forest crops and agricultural crops are very similar. One takes a little longer than the other. It takes longer to get a paycheck, but you know, it's agriculture, so we're tickled with that. And the emergency response that the department already had in hurricane response and those kinds of things, we had that synergy already. And we've added things that have really helped us with the law enforcement that the Forest Service has. It's been a great help to us, even as far as the Mountain State Fair. So it's a great fit, a great partnership, and one that North Carolina should cherish. You know, I think about the terrible wildfires now in the western part of the U.S. and the things that are going on there. And the Forest Service now has 70-some people from North Carolina that have responded to this. And yesterday, Scott told me that we've also got 3 engines going to the West Coast, driving them 35 hours to get to the West Coast to respond to what's going on out there. As you look at these fires on television in the West, it could never happen in North Carolina, could it? Oh, yes, it can. All it's going to take is a major drought, and we could be right back in 2011 or worse. And I think the thing that most people in this state don't realize is we lead the nation in the proximity of buildings and people to forests. That means anytime we have a forest fire, the danger goes much further than just burning up the forest and the trees. It's about people and houses, and you see that in the West now. So we've got to continually be able to respond to these disaster situations and make sure that both people and property are protected, and that's what the Forest Service does so well. A lot of what the Forest Service does now is still, you gotta work. You gotta have the rakes, the hand tools, and go out and fight the fire, even with all the equipment we have. And you can imagine that it's dirty work, it's hot work, it's physical work, and it's dangerous work. So it's not for the faint of heart, and I just thank all of the members of the North Carolina State Forest Service and the things that they do every day. We've lost 3 firefighters already in the West. I certainly hope and pray that all our people from North Carolina come back safe and alive, and we're going to pray that that happens. And all that I've said today, Governor McCrory agrees with the value of the North Carolina Forest Service and the things that they do, and so he's issued a proclamation that I want to read to you, and I want to present this to the Forest Service. It says, State of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, Governor, the 100th anniversary of the North Carolina Forest Service, 2015, by the Governor of the State of North Carolina, a proclamation. Whereas in 1915, the North Carolina General Assembly recognized the need to protect the forest resources, and whereas the same year, John Simcock Holmes was appointed State Forestry and State Forest Warden in order to carry out the protection mission, and whereas the North Carolina Forest Service can mark its birth from this legislative action, and whereas the duties of the North Carolina Forest Service have dramatically increased to encompass education, landowner assistance, urban forestry, insect and disease control, and much more, and whereas the responsibilities have been carried out with the vigor, determination, and skill, and whereas these services have tremendously improved the state of North Carolina's forest resources, and whereas 2015 marks the centennial of the North Carolina Forest Service existence, now, therefore, I, Pat McCrory, Governor of the State of North Carolina, do hereby proclaim 2015 as the 100th anniversary of the North Carolina Forest Service, recognizing its vital service to the people of North Carolina and commend this observation to all citizens. I witnessed whereof I have hereunto set my hand and affixed the great seal of the state of North Carolina at the Capitol in Raleigh this 11th day of March in the year of our Lord 2015, and of the independence of the United States of America, the 239th. So Scott, I would like to present this to you.
Scott, can I get one more? I'm sorry. Let me go. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Troxler. We accept this proudly on behalf of the North Carolina Forest Service. Ask anyone in the North Carolina Forest Service and they will tell you we are one large family, more than 650 strong. And like families of old, we have a family crest. A shield that binds us and reminds us each is that we, through unity, through working together, that we are strongest. For us this shield is the badge that our men and women wear every day. It's the badge the public sees and knows, a point of pride for all those that serve in the North Carolina Forest Service since our inception in 1915. We've had many different badges. Our Centennial Commemorative badge makes the latest one. They have changed throughout the years, the first one being issued between 1915 and 1925 to our forest fire wardens. The style of the badge would change between 1925 and 1936, and again between 1936 and 1948, but still represented the forest fire warden. It wasn't until 1948 that the badges recognized the work that we do beyond fire control and helped us move into the era of the forest ranger and all the work that the folks in the field do to help our forests keep growing every day. The badge would change again in 1974, 1978, 1990, and 2005. There have also been many different badges specifically for our law enforcement personnel and our aviation folks. And of course this year we unveiled our Centennial Commemorative badge, issuing one to every member of the North Carolina Forest Service family in honor of the work we do every day. And today I have the honor of presenting this Centennial Commemorative badge to Commissioner Steve Troxler in honor of his continued support to the North Carolina Forest Service family. At this time, I'd like to introduce Michael Huffman, Forest Supervisor for here at Clemmons Educational State Forest.
Welcome to the woods. I've been the Forest Supervisor here for quite a while. I'm almost as old as the Forest Service. I've served for 40 years, so most of my time's been here, so I know I look as old as the land. But this land we stand on today has a long and varied history of being farm or forest land. In the mid-1800s, there were enough longleaf pines here to support a naval store operation. In fact, you can still find evidence of box-faced stumps throughout the forest. Box facing was the oldest form of collecting sap of the longleaf to make turpentine, pitch, and other naval store products. However, in the late 1800s, the forest gave way to farming and the trees were harvested to make room for crops. The original property, located on the south side of Old US 70, the road you came in on, was purchased in 1927, establishing the first state forest tree seedling nursery in North Carolina. The Work Progress Administration established a Civilian Conservation Corps camp on that site, and those workers developed the land and grew the seedlings. The North Carolina Forest Service's first state forester, John Holmes, recognized the need to expand the nursery and did so to aid in the land reclamation program. In 1936, the state purchased 96.5 acres on this side of 70, and the nursery was expanded. During this time, the nursery workers grew mostly pine seedlings, but experimental seedlings were also planted, and many of these plots are still located on the forest today. Around 1937, Moody Clemmons came to work as a semi-skilled worker at the nursery overseeing the CCC boys. At one time, he was a CC worker, but when he transferred here, he became a different level of employee. He would later be appointed by State Forester Holmes as a nurseryman and then the nursery supervisor. His influence on the nursery program and forestry was quite evident, hence the reason this forest was named in his honor. We usually refer to people who grow plants really well as having a green thumb. I had the privilege of working with Mr. Clemmons, and he had a green hand. I honestly believe that he could throw a dead stick in the ground and get it to live. So he could do anything when it came to growing. Between 1940 and 41, just over 203 acres were purchased to bring the total acreage to more than 314 acres. In the early 70s, it was determined that there wasn't a sufficient water supply to continue with seedling production, and it was determined that production needed to increase to keep up with the demand. So the nursery operation here was moved to our Claridge nursery in Goldsboro. The state forester at that time, Ralph Winkworth, recognized this was an opportunity to help fulfill the North Carolina Forest Service mandate of educating the general public about proper forestry management and started the small state forest. Aided by a federal grant from the Bureau of Outdoor Recreation, Clayton State Forest became the first of these, then Holmes State Forest, Tuttle State Forest, and Rendezvous Mountain State Forest. Most of the work for the small state forest was completed by 1976. Clayton State Forest was renamed the Moody M. Clemmons State Forest on August 1st, 1976, and dedicated the following December, 5 months after Mr. Clemmons retired. In the 1980s, the Rangers developed an aggressive educational program, and the forest name was changed once more to reflect our mission to Clemmons Educational State Forest. The forest has purchased 175 acres from Mr. Clemmons. He didn't want anybody else to have the property. He wanted it to remain in forest land, and that's how much he was dedicated to what's going on here. Over time, we purchased more land, and the forest is now 826 acres. The most important thing that we do here, though, is educate the youth about proper forest management and their natural resources and the importance of our forest land for the great state of North Carolina. Thank you.
We have one special presentation. Mr. Gibson, Executive Director of North Carolina Forestry Association, would like to make a special presentation this time.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. I'm not on the calendar. I don't need a microphone. Everything that Commissioner Troxler and other speakers have talked about today is true. The Forest Service is more than the folks that drive around in the green truck with Smokey in the back. They're more than the definition of public service. For the folks in our industry, our 4,000 members in the NCFA, their 75,000 employees, the dozens of partners like Farm Bureau and Grange and Tree Farm and the Loggers Association, they're more than that. They're like family. And on behalf of our industry, we'd like to present you with a Pulaski. For those of you who don't know what a Pulaski is, you saw the shiny ones when they came up in the honor guard. This is the tool that protects you from wildfires, and it's the symbol of the Forest Service. And we've got one engraved for Commissioner Troxler, and we asked him to not use it for wildfires, but would sure come in handy with the legislature right now. We're going our program this year in our annual meeting, we're going to have 100 years of the Forest Service history, and that's when Scott will get his.
All right, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. And in agriculture, we have a very similar tool called a mattock.
Yep.
And my grandfather actually wore them out. And I'm not that strong, but I have a long history with these.
It's sharp.
We'd like to thank everyone for coming out today for our Centennial celebration. It's truly been an honor to have everybody here. And at this time, let's enjoy cake and refreshments and have fellowship and enjoy looking at the equipment. But thank you for coming today.